左手邊紅色衫呢位。
Mrs. Lam, from South China Morning Post. So nearly 90,000 people has left Hong Kong since mid-2020, and now people are worried that the foreign companies could be leaving too with the anti-foreign sanctions law. So officials said the local legislative process would help the government to address their concerns. But how long would this process take? Would the LegCo be required to complete the process by the end of October? About 1,500 companies chose Hong Kong for their regional headquarters. Are you worried that many of them could be leaving with this new law? And if that happens, would Hong Kong continue to be known as an international financial center? My second question is on quarantine arrangements. So we know that 15 places will soon become high risk and require 21 days of quarantine. But when will the government implement the scientific committee's recommendation about 14-day quarantine for people from low and medium risk countries with antibody? And would the government also consider postponing the arrangement under which visitors from these countries only need 7 days of quarantine if they pass the antibody test at the airport? Is it possible that we can impose like a stricter ban for people visiting from low and medium risk countries? Thank you.
Thank you for the two questions. First of all, I realize that recently there have been a lot of discussion on people leaving Hong Kong, and this figure released, which was a figure released regularly on the so-called net inflow and net outflow, has stirred up some debate about this figure of 90,000. I do not want to sound defensive, but one has to look into this, how this figure was arrived at. It is a sort of net figure of the number of outflow minus the number of inflow. Yes, there may be an increase in the number of outflows, but you will also notice that we have a significant reduction in the number of people coming in, mainly from the mainland because of the travel restrictions. The number of one-way permit holders, that is mainlanders coming into Hong Kong for family reunion, has significantly reduced because of the travel restrictions. So we are nowhere near the figure used to be about, on average, 150 a day. So that is a factor that one should look into. But never mind those figures. As I said, I don't want to be defensive and to say that there's no person leaving Hong Kong for various reasons. My stance has always been Hong Kong people has freedom of movement. They have a free mind. They could decide where and when to leave Hong Kong or come back to Hong Kong, particularly for families with young children who may want children to have another form of education. So, but it is very important for Hong Kong to continue to be able to attract talents and to retain talents in Hong Kong. Of course, also to nurture local talents. And I can assure you that we are doing on every front on nurturing talents. We are continuing to invest in education, and we are even doing more on the STEM education because we do see innovation and technology as an emerging engine of growth for Hong Kong. There are two recent developments which may prove that Hong Kong remains very attractive. As you know, we have a quality migrant admission scheme that bring in talents from all over the world. There used to be a quota of 1,000, which was never used up previously. In my policy address, I think last year, I raised this quota in anticipation of our capacity and ability to recruit more quality migrants. I was told by the committee that there was a significant increase in the successful applicants under the quality migrant scheme. So in other words, more talents are now coming to settle in Hong Kong. The second incident was the scheme that I introduced last year in my policy address about a global STEM professorship scheme. So we are trying to recruit the very promising or very distinguished scientists from all over the world to come to Hong Kong to join us in this innovation and technology development. We have money for only a quota of 100. Universities nomination, this is, by the way, not an application or employment admission scheme. This is by nomination. We received more than 100 nominations from the UGC-funded institutions, and the first batch of successful nominees exceeded 40 already. And many of them came from very distinguished universities all over the world. So while at the same time people choose to leave Hong Kong, I am pretty optimistic that with our fundamental strengths and the opportunities available upon integrating into the mainland development, particularly the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area, we will be able to recruit more talents. So similarly for foreign companies using Hong Kong as a regional headquarters, regional office, or setting up a local office, Hong Kong will continue to be an attractive destination. In recent interactions with the business chambers based in Hong Kong, I have this very strong feeling that their initial anxiety about the national security law has subsided. But you are right that the passing of the anti-foreign sanctions law by the National People's Congress Standing Committee and its likely application to Hong Kong by inclusion in Annex 3 may have generate other anxiety. So I said on this occasion last Tuesday that my advice and sort of opinion to the National People's Congress Standing Committee is for us to go through a local legislative process so that we could be in a better position to explain the purpose of this anti-foreign sanctions law and to take into account Hong Kong's actual situation before we prepare this piece of local legislation. At the moment, we don't have explicit timetable because the NPCSC has yet to make a decision on listing this anti-foreign sanctions law into Annex 3 of Basic Law for application to Hong Kong. But we have started some initial discussion on what the law should look like if there is going to be a piece of local legislation. And by the way, we do have local legislation to implement CPG decisions on UN sanctions. So it is not an entirely alien area that we do not know how to draft the law. But at this moment, I could not give you a timetable. But one will realize that the sixth-term Legislative Council only have 2 more months to go. They will go into prorogue by the end of October to prepare for the general election on the 19th of December. So in my opinion, it will be an extremely tight timetable to rush a piece of legislation with the necessary consultation with stakeholders within this term of the Legislative Council. But that is, of course, my opinion at the moment, because I could not preempt the National People's Congress Standing Committee on its decision sometime this week. Now, on the quarantine arrangement.
今日最後一條，後邊嗰位男記者。
特首你好，中評社。最近本港外來輸入確診案例中咧，唔少人都係接種過2劑疫苗㗎啦。咁想問特首，關於接種疫苗可以縮短呢個檢疫期嘅安排，會唔會造成呢個外防輸入嘅漏洞？同埋特區政府會唔會進一步收緊呢個海外地區來港人士嘅檢疫要求 ？Thank you。
喺處理新冠疫情嘅過程裏邊咧，我哋時刻都係要緊記，我哋必須要因時制宜。當喺外圍發生咗一啲嘅情況嘅時候咧，我哋要同專家商量啦，然後調整我哋嗰個政策。香港已經係結束咗我哋由舊年11月發生嘅第4波嘅疫情。咁所以喺今年4月咧，我哋亦都公布咗一個抗疫嘅新路向，就係我哋希望能夠維持到呢個局面，係唔需要嗰啲社交距離嘅措施咧時緊時鬆，亦都盡量咧可以俾翻香港市民有一啲機會外出， 同埋翻嚟嚇。咁所以喺當時咧，我哋喺6月嘅時候，亦都係得到專家嘅意見，認為一個血液嘅抗體嘅測試係有助於我哋更加可以知道呢一個人士咧係佢哋接受咗新冠疫苗之後咧，亦都係出現咗抗體嚇。咁所以可以將佢哋嗰個強制嘅指定酒店嘅檢測期咧，或者檢疫期咧係縮短到去7天啊。呢個新嘅政策咧，第一期係適用於香港居民，佢喺香港接受咗疫苗嘅接種，做咗即係血液嘅抗體嘅檢測，有一個證明之後咧，佢係喺去外地翻嚟咧，如果唔係屬於即係Group A A 組嘅高危嘅地方咧，係可以將呢個檢疫期咧由14天減到去7天嚇。咁過去應該都有唔少嘅香港市民咧係因此咧係受惠嘅嚇。咁但鑑於我哋亦都發現咧，喺咁嘅情況之下，事實上亦都有一啲叫 breakthrough 一啲突破，就係話好似你提出啦，係接種咗疫苗，有晒抗體，但係翻嚟咧都喺檢疫期，甚至最近有一個咧係檢疫期以外咧係發現佢係受到感染嘅。咁所以我哋又需要即係因時制宜調校我哋嘅政策。所以昨天晚上咧，呢個聯合科學嘅委員會亦都係開咗會。開會嘅建議咧就係鑑於呢個情況同埋外圍嘅地方咧，仍然係嗰個確診個案係上升嘅嚇。特別係有好多同我哋有緊密接觸嘅地方啦，譬如係歐洲啲國家啦，同埋美國啦。咁所以我哋就做咗一啲嘅。喺之前我哋已經做咗一啲嘅舉措咧，就係將15個國家咧係由 B 提升到 A。換句話說咧，只係香港居民已經完成接種咧，可以翻嚟香港，而且全部都要21天嘅。另外將一個國家係應該係澳洲咧，由 C 提升到係 B 嚇。咁今日我哋將會考慮埋昨天晚上專家對於呢個抗體測試是否仍然係穩妥成為一個減短抗疫期嗰個嘅基礎嘅意見之後咧，我哋今日亦都有啲公佈。公佈嘅方向咧都係會收緊嘅，即係話唔會再以一個抗體嘅陽性嘅基礎咧嚟到縮短嗰個嘅喺指定酒店嘅檢疫期。即係話咧，除咗喺即係最低風險嘅 Group C 而家得一個國家嘅啫，其他人咧都唔會少過14天嘅檢疫期㗎啦。希望能夠喺外防輸入嗰度咧就做得更加即係緊湊。但係我亦都唔會覺得早前咧係一個所謂漏洞，因為正如我所講，每一日我哋都要調校我哋嘅政策嚟到去應對市民有一定嘅訴求嚇，已經超過咗1年半嚇。咁所以對於每一次翻嚟香港21天、14天咧，事實上係市民係有啲嘅不耐煩啦嚇。尤其是政府又鼓勵佢打針，佢又打晒針，原來都冇分別。咁但係而家又見到個情況係可能會惡化咧，所以又採取咗呢個行動。咁相信喺未來一段嘅日子咧，我哋都要繼續咁樣不斷檢視我哋嘅措施嚇。一有需要，我哋就要作出一個調校嚇，令到香港咧可以唔需要出現新一波嘅疫情。